Hello and welcome everyone to the last of our parallel sessions for the online part of PCST 2023. I think it's vitally important to have these sessions to give people unable to come to Rotterdam the chance to speak and be heard. Please be aware that this will be recorded so that even more people can access the presentations that are here today. We have a wonderful panel of speakers for this last session of the online conference, which is on past, present and future, Scicom and politics. So in terms of that, our first speaker is from China, the second speaker Spain, the third Germany, the fourth Bangladesh and the fifth India. So we're covering quite a large part of the world and all looking at various aspects of science communication, policy and action in the past, today and into the future. I would welcome everyone to use the chat to ask questions and to have discussions. The speakers have been asked to speak for a maximum of 10 minutes. If they finish before 10 minutes, we'll have time for a couple of clarifying questions. If they don't finish by 10 minutes, then we won't be able to have those clarifying questions, but you can ask questions in the chat and they can reply to you in the chat. We still hope to have a 15-minute to 20-minute discussion at the end where we can explore things across all the presentations here today. So I'd like to welcome our first speaker, who is Xiao. He's from the Communication University of China, in China, and he's speaking about Chinese science has no past unless it's patriotic. How is the future of science different from the past? A comparative studies of scientists and science news. Thank you very much, Qing.
Okay, thank you. Now I will do the presentations about the Chinese science. As we all know, the Chinese government is considered representative of authoritarianism, with the technocratical and bureaucratical citizens being keen to this authoritarianism. Thus, the perception and the judgment of technology constitute the key to China's national development. Deng Xiaoping's famous statement, "Science and technology is the first productive force," made a mild reversal of Mao's list and moved China from a class-driven economical development line to seemingly new liberalisms. So in other words, we must be aware that one of the most important shifts in contemporary Chinese history, the shift from Mao Zedong era to Deng Xiaoping era, was caused precisely by a change in the perception of the attitude towards science and technology, from being revolutionary in nature or a tool of the revolutionaries, and science become something nature, relative, objective, and capable of driving social development in the first place. At the same time, we have realized that this violent transformation is also a violent rupture, a violent surrender, and a serving of the emerging technologically era from the Soviet-style technology society of the past. So we wish to analyze this rupture or resolving, in other words, with the help of the concept of temporality and two types of the science-related media news as the analytic material. So some studies already focus on Chinese science videos and articles, and the strategy of science communication in China is analyzed from the perspective of empirical research. And these studies have ignored the temporary structure of them, and which we see here as the key to the content of science. This would complete the process of embedding science in the national sphere. Specifically, we conduct a textual ideological analysis of biographies of scientists and science news, and a thematical analysis of the relationship between science and the state. Overall, two types of temporal dimensions, namely the past and the future, exist here in these two types of tasks. So in biographies of scientists add historical and contemporary figures connect the revolutionary history and the contemporary, that is the pre-Mao Zedongist, the Maoist, and the post-Maoist eras. Scientists here are not only over-politicalized, but also over-ordered compared to an unorganized history of the individual lives in reality. Based on our interviews with journalists and the textual analysis, we found that in biographic news, scientists always overcome various difficulties for the sake, for the country, for the politics, such as writing their own textbooks for some national development tasks. For example, development for nuclear bombs when there are no textbooks, or transcribing English literature by themselves in the days of hunger and the cold. Almost all the biographies or the journalists of scientists we interviewed described the difficulty of connecting the dots between science and national politics, but it's a task that must be accomplished. Finally, the life of scientists is always transcribed into the life of politics. And for such stories, time is continuous and does not create a break at the time of reform and opening. In those biographies, journalists and editors' views, the population, especially those who lacking basic science knowledge, has difficulty understanding science, which itself is still precious and therefore requires translation. So Chinese biographies journalists always have to operate the jargon of scientific words, such as specialized vocabularies, standard of judgments, and statistics. And this jargon is incorporated into the system of state power in journalist reporting. And in other words, the journalist did not abandon science and in the regularization of technologies into the superficial patriotic stories, but still retained scientific professionalism. None did they abandon politics as in talking only about the knowledge of technologies. And in another news, the science news, technology is especially new and in line with national policies such as dual carbon policies and related technology breakthroughs. It always described as important drivers of the country's future, or the Qing to leading the country to a better future. In this type of news, science and politics are often separated or are only concerned with science and technology itself. We can see here that the science journalism is simply news about science or designed to educate the public about technologies. And the journalists here in this category try to make principles of science and technologies understandable to a mass audience or as many readers as possible, rather than understanding readers as mere objects of political indoctrinations. So by analyzing two science-related content in China, we find the emergence of two views of time, similar to the line between Deng and Mao, in which science is patriarchal and those connects this past and the present in the category of the past, while technology is nature and the revolutionary in the category of the future as a decisive force for the economical and the ecologically development. And I think the time is over, right? Or do I still have any time?
You still have some time.
Okay, thank you. And also, I hope to use the Heidegger and the Boxing studies to conduct the next analysis. And Heidegger's concept of temporality suggests that our experience of time is rooted in the way that we exist in the world. It emphasizes the interconnectedness of the past, the present, and the future. This notion of temporality can help us analyze the shift in China's attitude towards science, and it reveals how science and technologies are intertwined with the historical, political, and social dimensions of the nation. And in the case of scientists' biographies, the past and the present are interconnected with scientists' life, reflecting the continuous development of the nation's political histories. And the future, on the other hand, is portrayed in science news as separate from politics, focusing on the role of technology in driving economical and ecology progress, and Bergson's concept of time as duration, which posits that time is an indivisible and heterogeneous flow of experience, also offers a valuable perspective on the changing perception of science and technology in China. And according to Bergson, time cannot be separated into distinct units, and it forms an organic whole which will past, present, and future intermingle. In the context of China's transformation, the temporary domination of science and technology must be seen as an inseparable ongoing process rather than the distinct stages. So both categories and Bergson's perspective on time can help us understand how the Chinese government's perception of science has evolved by shifting from a revolutionary tool to a more nature objective force driving social development. And science and technologies have undergone a process of temporary reconstructions, and the reconstruction is critical by the intervening of the past, the present, and the future, as well as the interplay between science, politics, and national identities. And we continue our analysis, we can better comprehend the complexity of China's changing attitude towards science and technologies and its complications on the national development trajectory. And with the use of biographic journalism of scientists, China continues its revolution as it was just established in 1949, and just as it was in the Cultural Revolution in the 1916. And other kind of journalism, the public popularization of technology, which here we call science news, where science companies depoliticalization and leads post-socialist China to a technology future that has lost its social revolutionary passion. And as China shifts from a revolutionary attitude towards science and a more nature and objective one, it's also adopting to the trends and opportunities presented by the global empire and choose another pace. The Chinese government recognized its importance of science and technologies as the key drivers of economical growth and global influence. Therefore, the Chinese government chose to make a binary. Okay.
Yep, we need to wrap it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Do you want to just finish on that slide?
Oh yeah. It's a conclusion, and in summary, two types of portraits of science and technologies are currently prevalent in the Chinese media. So politically oriented biographies of scientists and relevated political and public science popularization of emerging technologies in the form. So in the form, the scientist's life connects the various stages of China's development across time, pre-statehood, post-statehood, reform and opening up, and Xi Jinping's era. And in the later case, journalists focus on the rationale of the technology, the corresponding facilities,
thanks.
and the potential. Okay.
Thank you very much, Xing. That's fascinating stuff. If you want to stop sharing, I have to say that there's some really interesting ideas up there, and it might be interesting to explore some of the interesting terms you use, such as not over politicized but over ordered. So scientists being not over politicized but over ordered, and looking at the past being driven by patriotism and revolution, whereas the future by technology and society needs. An interesting difference there, and an interesting evolution. I'd like to welcome our second speaker, Luis Arboledas-Lérida from the University of Sevilla in Spain. He'll be talking about the social conversation around science and the commodification of science, a very interesting term, making a case for science communication as propaganda. Thank you very much, Luis.
Thank you, So I proceed to share my slides. Well, the purpose of my presentation is basically to introduce to you a new reading of science communication in its, let's say, in the context of the commodification of academia. More precisely, I want to make a case for approaching science communication as an issue of propaganda. Well, the first thing to consider regarding so is that on a general basis, experts in science communication have paid little attention to the issue of propaganda. There is like
Lewis,
yeah?
did you want to share your screen? Because we're not seeing any slides.
Oh, sorry. I
Yeah.
thought I was doing so.
I thought you did, but yes.
Okay, now, great.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks to you. Thanks for letting me know. And well, as I was saying, there is like a sort of consensus saying that science communication has nothing to do with propaganda. But we are in trouble if we take this statement to the letter in the case of research in science communication, because we are left without analytical tools that will allow us to shed light on propagandistic uses of science communication that might be happening within the social conversation around science. In fact, I consider that there is at least one case in which it is plausible and legitimate to think of propagandistic uses of science communication, and that has to do with the commodification of academia. Why? Because the commodification of academia and academic research is a highly controversial process that has been met with opposition and resistance in the past and will continue to do so in the future because of the negative externalities that are associated to that process. Think of a recent initiative in which more than 100 global leaders have signed a document stressing that during the coronavirus pandemic, private profits were before public health concerns. And one of the aspects in which they focused on was that research that led to the development of vaccine technologies was actually publicly funded research for the most part of it. So we have witnessed during this pandemic a transfer of public funds into private pockets, the privatization of public research, so to speak. And this illustrates the controversial character of the commodification of academia, to which I referred to. So one of the tasks of the day regarding the commodification of academia is the legitimation at the social level of that new financial and economic reality for universities and academic institutions. And that means that every of us and the society at large must internalize those principles, values, practices, social arrangements, etc., that come with the commodification of academia and that can be captured by referring to the ideology of academic entrepreneurship. Well, these are the social conditions in a broad outline in which it is legitimate and plausible to think of propagandistic uses of science communication. But now the point is, what is propaganda? Propaganda has been recently defined as the non-consensual organized persuasive communication. According to this definition, three main features of propaganda stand out. The first one goes for persuasion. Of course, propaganda is persuasive communication. That goes without saying. We pretend to generate public support towards a given cause. The second aspect is organization. At some point, propaganda always involves that several people act coordinately in order to produce and disseminate propagandistic claims. But the real point here, to me, is that propaganda is the expression of particular interest organized at the social level, organized as a social power. To be truly effective, propaganda needs labor, money, time, things to which only very powerful social agents can have access. Accordingly, several authors have considered propaganda to be the reserve of the elites. And finally, we have that propaganda is non-consensual. Propaganda chiefly operates through symbolic manipulation. And that means that recipients of propaganda are not provided with all the relevant information that they otherwise would need in order to make a balanced judgment about that reality to which propaganda refers. So propaganda hinders human agency. This later aspect brings to the foreground the intimate connection between propaganda and ideology. At the end of the day, propaganda is intended to the production and dissemination of ideological constructs that pretend to be dominant. That is to say, the natural, self-evident way to think of a given reality, to intellectually appropriate a given reality. And that intimate connection between propaganda and ideology recalls something that I said earlier concerning the ideology of academic entrepreneurship. From all this previous development, we can conclude that if we can hypothesize a propagandistic use of science communication in the context of the commodification of academia, the purpose of that instrumentalization of science communication will be spreading the ideology of academic entrepreneurship. But I'm aware that this conclusion has been reached on a rather general level of abstraction, and that needs empirical support. This is so I wanted to comment with you on some empirical evidence that I've taken from the Spanish press, in which it is undoubtedly clear that there has been a propagandistic use of science communication intended to spreading the ideology of academic entrepreneurship. However, as I'm running out of time, I will not go into details, so I will jump directly to the conclusion, which is that, the conclusion is that there is something to look at here. There is more research that needs to be conducted in relation to the propagandistic shapes that science communication might take in the face of the capitalist pressures endured by the scientific enterprise. In that guise, in that shape, science communication will be contributing to the social legitimation of the commodification of academia and academic research. So that's all from my side. So many thanks for your attention. And if you have any comments to make on my presentation, don't hesitate to let me know, either now or by mail, following me on social media, etc. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Lewis. If you could close that, thank you. You actually finished a bit early, so if anyone has any questions, please let us know, because we do have a minute or two to take your questions. I had one, and that is, in this whole idea of propaganda and entrepreneurship and how that's connected, how does power relationships work within that? I mean, this whole idea of propaganda and entrepreneurship, is there a shift in power to, if you like, the marketer or the seller of the technology?
I think I'm not sure if I understood your question, but I will say that the propagandistic use of science communication intended to that legitimation of the commodification of academia has to do with powerful social agents, university managers, policymakers, etc., that want to convince every of us that this is the best way to conceive universities or academia and their connection with the industrial world and the rest of society. So, of course, there is a power relationship here that has to do with the shifting power from academic faculty to university managers, policymakers in the future of universities and of academic research.
Okay, thank you very much. You still have a minute left, so is there anything else you wanted to say about this whole thing? AP puts into the chat, production, distribution, exchange, consumption of SciTech.com has all the features of commoditization, and that's natural. Do you have anything to say and comment to that?
let me try to unfold the thought behind that. I would then say that this is something natural. In fact, what is pretended is to naturalize the commodification of academia. In fact, when I was saying that propaganda is intended to the production of ideological constructs, I highlighted that these ideological constructs, including the ideology of academic entrepreneurship, want to pretend to naturalize a given state of affairs, including, in this sense, academic entrepreneurship. So it is not natural to use science communication for the dissemination of this ideological construct, but in fact there is a process of naturalization of that new power relationships that are taking place within academic settings.
Okay, thanks very much, Lewis. I know your study didn't cover it, but it'd be very interesting to look at how perhaps the public perceive this whole commodification of science that's happening that you've noted. Lewis, if you could stop sharing. I'm not sure why it's sharing at the moment, but that's okay. We will go to our third speaker. I'd like to welcome Nicola from the Technical University in Germany. And she's talking about you can do better than that. Climate and COVID-19 experts addressing politics on Twitter. Thank you very much, Nicola.
So, okay, I just had to, so you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, hi everyone from my side, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here today, and welcome to our presentation, which is titled "You Can Do Better Than That, Tweeting Scientists Addressing Politics on Climate Change and COVID-19. I am giving this presentation also on behalf of Kaija Biermann and Monika Taddicken, and Kaija is in this room here today too, so she might be joining us for the discussion later on. And so for the next few minutes, we will give you an insight how German climate and COVID-19 experts address politics on Twitter. So first of all, why did we compare the communication of scientists of the fields of COVID-19 and climate change? Well, the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change represent so-called socio-scientific issues, which can be described as controversial, socially relevant, and real-world problems that are informed by science. And within these two issues, scientists play a crucial role, and immediate political actions are and were necessary. However, the two issues are also very different because, of course, they have distinct histories. Scientists brought the issue of climate change on the policy agenda already in the 1980s. The pandemic, as we all know, as an issue emerged in 2020. And quick, far-reaching measures in Germany were taken by policymakers to combat the spread of the virus, which surprised many scientists. They were surprised by the speed and scale of such responses, of such governmental responses, especially when comparing these responses to the responses to climate change. And why is it interesting to look at scientists who address politics on social media? Well, within social scientific issues, scientists have become important public communicators, acting as policy advisors to the public, while they otherwise often remain invisible to the broader public. And social media offer scientists the potential to express calls to actions and their personal views towards politics, and also to bypass traditional gatekeepers. And when scientists express calls to actions and personal views, they transgress their role as pure scientists who mainly focus on their own research and do not actively engage in public discourses. But when advocating for a particular policy, for example, scientists may be defined as issue advocates. And Colonia et al. In their study found out that in the case of climate change, both scientists and the public believe that scientists should actively advocate for policies. Also, in Germany, climate change has been widely accepted as a serious societal problem, and climate experts are thus operating in an environment that is characterized by a high degree of agreement on anthropogenic climate change. So if and how scientists do actually include advice in their direct public communication has raised little scholarly attention so far. And we wanted to address this research gap and investigated these following two research questions. So the first one, how do visible German climate experts compared to visible German COVID-19 experts advocate policies in public discourses on Twitter? And the second, how do visible German climate experts compared to visible German COVID-19 experts assess policies and politics in public discourses on Twitter? And in order to answer the research question, we conducted manual content analysis by two coders with close to 6,000 tweets of 5 visible climate experts and 5 visible COVID-19 experts. This was a full study, so we included all original tweets, quotes, and replies by the 10 German experts from the year 2021 in our study. And we chose the year 2021 because compared to 2020, climate change regained political attention, especially surrounding the flood disaster in Western Germany in July. And while in 2020, COVID-19 was the overlaying topic. And our coding scheme included if scientists address politics, and if yes, if they included calls to actions and aspects of assessments where we considered evaluation, degradation of competence, and blaming. And for interquota reliability, we calculated Krippendorff's alpha, which ranged across the variables between 0.7 and 0.93. So what do our results show? Our results show overall that every 4th tweet by the climate experts and address politics, while almost every 5th tweet by the COVID-19 experts addressed politics. And within the tweets that address politics, calls to action were present in almost 30% of climate experts' tweets and in 60% of the COVID-19 experts' tweets. And we have also illustrated a few examples here on the right-hand side where you can see, for example, that scientists expressed their views during the election campaign on the coal phased out, or during the pandemic, they call for ministers of education to follow a certain strategy in terms of school closing measures. We have also found aspects of assessments in climate and COVID-19 expert tweets. And for example, negative evaluation was present in around 26% of climate experts' tweets that addressed politics and in only 10% of COVID-19 expert tweets. In 14.5% of tweets, climate experts degraded competence of politicians, while this was only in 1.4% of the COVID-19 experts' tweets. And climate experts also blamed politics and politicians more often. In 10% of their tweets, they used blaming to address politics, while this was only the case in 2.5% of the COVID-19 experts' tweets. So what can we see and learn from that is that both climate experts and COVID-19 experts used Twitter to address politics, albeit to varying degrees. And the instant threat of the pandemic might have caused COVID-19 experts to use Twitter to advocate certain measures to combat the virus, thus the high share of calls to action we saw. And The much more negative assessments in connection with fewer political calls to action by the climate experts may be regarded as indicators of frustration due to the lack of responses from politicians. And the histories, which we talked about a little bit earlier, of both issues might have influenced visible scientist communication. We can support the conclusion that the urgency of issues tends to draw scientists into politics, as in this case, COVID-19 and climate change. And this study supports previous research that in highly politicized fields, scientists do express their own views, as for example, Walter et al. Found out. And lastly, a possible implication one could draw from that is that communicating scientists should consider reflecting on their own role when engaging in public discourses. Okay, so with that, I'd like to say thank you, and we're looking forward to the discussion later on. And if you're interested in the details of this presentation, we would like to recommend our paper that has just been published in Media and Communication. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nicola. I have one question because you have a minute left, and that is, you said they should reflect on their roles. What do you mean by that?
Well, I
At
think
the end there.
Especially when concerning the role of the pure scientist or issue advocates. So they should be aware of which role they are taking and which role they want to represent, and which is their role in society with interrelations and of science and politics. So I think they should be aware, we think that they should be aware of which role they are taking and how they are communicating towards politics and in public discourses.
So this is a self-awareness, not something they would add to their tweets.
No, I think first of all, self-awareness is important. But this is just anecdotal. So this should be that this is important, but also maybe express this on in their communication as well, which is quite difficult on Twitter due to the limitation of how to express there. But in general, of course, should maybe make clear when expressing own views that this is actually their own view. Yeah.
Okay. There's a question in the chat that I'll ask you because I think it's an important one. Olympia Driver asks you, how did you choose your experts to study in the Twitter space?
We did apply a pyramid scheme. So we started from the most visible experts. So this was in terms of following. So we chose the expert of each field, of the broad field, in terms of who has the most followers, and from that we went on and looked into whom they followed and who they followed. And so after a few rounds, we finished this list and we came up with 5 climate experts. They were over the threshold of 10,000 followers, and 14 COVID-19 experts. They were over the threshold of 10,000 followers, and then we chose the 5 of each who had the most followings in this. So yeah.
Visible scientists had lots of followers, in other words.
Yes, exactly. That's were our definition for that in this case. Yes.
Habib's put a question in the chat, but you can answer that yourself, because I would like to now invite Habib Muhammad Ali from the University of Liberal Arts in Bangladesh to talk to us today about implications of science communication for NGOs in addressing COVID-19 in Bangladesh. So thank you very much, Habib. If you could share your screen, we'll get going with your talk.
Thank you, Jenny, for giving me the options to talk about my presentation. Can you hear me clearly, please?
I can hear you, Habib, but can you put can you run your presentation so we don't see all your slides on the side?
Okay, can you see it clearly now? Is that okay?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
That's all right. Just give me a sec. Okay.
All right, you right?
Okay, I'm right. Just to my screen a little bit. Just keep it.
We can see it
Okay,
fine.
yeah, it's good. So, welcome all in this online presentations, and thank you so much for the Public Communication Science and Technology Conference Authority for actually awarding me the Keble Foundation grant in order to take part in this conference. My topic already has been articulated that it is about implication of science communication for NGOs in addressing COVID-19 in Bangladesh. It's a qualitative reflections. As you know that our country is located in South Asia, it is just nearby India and China, and it's in Myanmar, near Myanmar. So we are developing nations, and NGOs plays a vital role for the development of the country from different areas, aspects such as medical, such as climate change, such as social change, youth empowerment. So my discussion is important, and why it is important, I need to focus first that it informs about an NGO's role, which serves as a science communicator during COVID-19. And the name of the NGO is Rupantar, which in English can be called as transformation. Sometimes they call also social transformation. So when I try to find it under the lens of science communication, it seems to me that, in particular, in the context of COVID-19, they are playing the role of science communicator and the mediator of science communication between the science-based organization and their target audience. So now I'm rolling out my presentation for you all. So what I want to say here, the NGO professionals communicate science-based informations to raise awareness of different health hazards, maybe from floods, drought, salinity in water due to sewage, tornadoes, and COVID-19 that we saw recently. So NGOs under the term of risk and health communication played a key role in raising awareness COVID-19 that you saw in different literature to counter misinformation by disseminating science-based information among target groups and stakeholders. I want to say they try to inform also the vulnerable group who are less informed and ignorant about the right information to prevent COVID-19. So what the literature really talking about? So discussions relating to NGO, COVID-19 and science communications is very limited, in particular in the context of science communication discipline. However, scholars of science communications, as we can find, that they try to focus on environmental interventions of NGOs in different parts of the world. For example, in Denmark, in maybe in the United States of America, in some other developing nations, that how NGOs are using science-based informations in order to interrogate the climate change-related knowledge and information. However, I already say that discussions are limited, in particular relating to NGO and science communication. So I ventured through understanding this topic as an exploratory approach and try to see the literature, try to depend on the literature of risk communication. And they are still doing some research on how NGOs are communicating information about the prevention of COVID-19. And this is particularly from health communication approach. We can relate through our science communication as well. So it creates a possibility to understand the topic, to investigate or examine the topic from science communication approach, because health and risk communication is also a branch, or also the branches of science communication, as we can imagine and reimagine. So science communication, how links with this COVID-19 communications or something? So of course, this is about the dissemination about information related to medical or health sciences. I already said it, that the NGOs try to disseminate information to the people about the medical and health intervention in order to prevent COVID-19. And to organize the entire process, entire campaign process, the NGOs depended on science-based institutions for the information that is needed to create their messages about COVID-19 preventions. And of course, this is about message creation. And when I try to understand the network, we can see that they try to develop a participatory network among the local people, among the youth groups, among the stakeholders, as a channel of communication of science-based information to prevent COVID-19. That NGO also developed a digital media contents. They have YouTube channels, Facebook channels, and other social network as supportive channels to facilitate the smooth operation to communicate the science-based and evidence-based information to counter misinformation and to give the right information at the right context in order to prevent COVID-19 in the vulnerable group or the target group in local areas of Bangladesh. So what is the methodology? It's an exploratory approach. I already said that it's a qualitative one. And from particularly me, I tried to focus on a case study approach. I tried to collect the data and semi-structured interview, and the analysis was done through content analysis and discourse analysis methods. We tried to focus on YouTube contents and the key NGO worker who was the main player how could I say, the main advocate who was doing the advocacy, organizing the campaign. He was interviewed, and we are intending to interview more 1 or 2 data creators, who each playing a major role in creation of the message and themes of the contents. So we try to mainly focus on the communicative dimensions of COVID-19 interventions of that particular NGO's campaign. So what do we find from the channels? Are you listening my, excuse me, are you listening my, are you all with me?
Yes, we are indeed, we are.
Okay, so what we have found in our research, this is the ongoing research. So we have seen that, we have found that the NGO is using social media channels like YouTube, Facebook, public service announcement, poster, leaflets, and the folk theater, and other forms of print media as well as cable network. I already said about the networks that develop among the youth groups and the community leaders. We already know about opinion leaders. They have their own network, already established network, to communicate the information. The interesting thing in this study that we have found that the youth groups they have selected or created served also as content creator. They also served as a celebrity in their content to act out about the themes and messages in YouTube content that were promoting the information or messages about COVID-19 preventions. And these youth groups also served as a critical role of communication, and it is about they also tried to monitor the positive and negative narratives regarding COVID-19 and the hate speech related to COVID-19 issue, and they tried to rectify it. They tried to intervene it through with the support of the NGO advocates. So what we find in the messages on the YouTube, so a number of themes have emerged through our analysis. We have seen that the points and the elements where they're focused in particular, the NGO. So we have seen that during COVID-19, they try to focus on the health hygiene, focus on using health hygiene and measure to prevent COVID-19's to prevent mass transmission of COVID-19. As you know that using masks, social distancing, and cleaning hands. So these are the primary measures were communicated, as well as some others such as isolation, such as quarantine. These all were communicated under this theme. The NGO had a major role in order to address misinformation, disinformation, rumor, and hate speech during COVID-19. They tried to detect what misinformation or rumor is going on in the society. And against that misinformation, rumors, they try to develop their own message. They try to clarify to the public, this is wrong and this is right. You have to do this and you don't have to do this. So, during COVID-19, all over the world, in most cases, frontline health workers facing discrimination in our country as well. Another added information is women and children are also facing disadvantage and discrimination because men are particularly the breadwinner here. So because men are losing jobs, and then it is impacting on women and children. Sometimes it is creating problem in the society, and some child marriage incidents are also happening during COVID-19 because of poverty in the rural society. So that NGOs try to give the information to the people, the child marriage age totally illegal in our country, and don't do this during COVID-19. This is unethical. During COVID-19, we had another incident, another natural catastrophe, and that is Cyclone Amphan. You know, during COVID-19, we have actually double barrel problem, and during
Habib, you've got half a minute.
Okay, so these are the themes, and this is the YouTube link. This is the Facebook channels. They're going on. We are also investigating those things. And the major findings of what we see, that they try to depend on science-based institutions for the information for the campaign, such as we have government-based organizations such as IEDCR, such as international organizations like WHO, CDC, and some other organization, ECDC. These are science-based organizations. They try to depend on for the right information to communicate, for the right information to develop the campaign message, and of course to check, to do the fact checking about addressing the hate speech or misinformation. So of course,
you need to wrap it up, please.
Okay, so finally, just give me a half minute or 1 minute, please. This theory tried to advance this study tried to advance the theory of participatory communication. Why it is about participatory? Because NGO plays a discursive role to communicate the COVID-19 prevention message and create a space to engage youths, local people, and NGO members in developing social contexts. It also tried to engage local people in science communication, engaging the science communication, and in particular, in turn, it will create a social transformation under the lens of science communication. It relied on scientific and welfare-based organizations for organizing campaign. It served as a mediator and co-creator of knowledge regarding COVID-19, and thus about science communications for their target audience and the local communities. So by way of conclusion, thank you all. This is my email, webpage, ResearchGate, Twitter, and references. What do you want? Done. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Habib. If you could stop sharing the screen, that'd be great. And I would like to welcome our last speaker in this last online session of our online conference, and that is AP Biermann from the National Centre for Science Communicators in India. And he's talking about science communication for social action, a proof of concept. Thank you, AP. AP, we can't hear you. It looks like he's getting some help to do the technology. AP, oh, sorry, where are we? Okay, AP, you're still muted, so you'll need to unmute yourself. Okay, we can hear you now.
Yeah. Can I have my slides now?
Okay, I will I'll share your slides for you. Okay. Just let me know when you want to go to the next slide.
Yes. Distinguished Madam and my fellow science communicators. Am I audible?
You are, but you might need to speak a little louder.
Thank you so much for giving me this professional opportunity to give an exposition of my lifelong activity, science communication. Science communication, can I move to the next slide, please?
Yes.
I have 10 minutes, I will move fast. Yes, this is the context and the background. I come from India. We have 1,700 languages and about 122 languages which are prominent. And 528 million people speak the official language called Hindi. English is spoken by hardly less than 1% of the population. Therefore, the mainstream science communication in my country is in the regional languages. And the regional languages constitute the Federation of Indian Language Science Communicators. They constitute the mainstream of science communication in India, which started in 1948 in the Bengali language with the Bose-Einstein statistics were both took the lead for that. Now, among these languages, I am going to speak to a very small language. That is the language of Kerala, where I come from. That is spoken by about 35 million people, and that is called Malayalam. It is a palindrome. You can write forward and backward if you read the same. Now, the proof of concept of using a regional language of India to make it equip it readily for scientific communication, that experiment was done not initially in Kerala, but in a place far away from that, almost about 1,200 kilometers away in the city of Mumbai, where the nuclear community, the engineers and scientists engaged in the nuclear establishment, created the language, equipped the language by generating scientific technical vocabulary, which the language was not having earlier. So that was the main contention of this, that Malayalam was empowered to communicate in science by a group of people away from the land. That's the beginning of it. May I have my next slide, please? Yes. So I come to the science, technology, and innovation communication through Malayalam. We have 35 million people, and right now our human development index is 0.74, and our females live for about 73 years. Our males are 69 years. And unfortunately, or very, very fortunately, we are a radioactive state. We have a natural radiation of 4 milligray per year. That's a background radiation. And we have male sex ratio. We have 1,084 women per 1,000 men. It's a womanly state. And most of the men, the scientific community, are staunch feminists. Then we have 60,000 science, technology, innovation activists in the state, out of which 25,000 women are science, technology activists. My Chinese colleague was referring to the number of people in the Chinese Scicom space. It was Mao Zedong who said that half the sky belongs to women. We were not able to achieve that. It was Castro who said that there should be a revolution within revolution to enable this proportionate distribution. We still have 25,000 women science activists, and we need to go up. We have become a livable and a viable state thanks to science, technology, communication. 1,300 people are in the network, and we have 2 science, technology, innovation activists per 100 of our population. May I move to my next stage, please? Yes. This all started with the Russian Revolution, the Russian science communication revolution, which you call Ruski Navuchia Kommunitskaya Revoluция. One of our former colleagues, Dr. MP, went to Soviet Union, was inspired and excited, motivated by the Russian science communication. He came back to the nuclear establishment and collected 100 flowers to bloom. He called 100 of us to start the science communication revolution, and that started in the 1966, and the proof of concept was to be developed there. It was largely done by the engineering scientists, and it was put on a production model. Next one. Thank you. In order to maximize the impact, social impact, we thought we should inform people what is the best that you can expect from science and technology. So we have Dr. MBA chemical engineer who said that the nuclear powered agro-industrial complex, put uranium into a nuclear reactor, you get food from the other side to get. We have simplified a concept of the nuclear power complex developed by Oak Ridge National Laboratories. And this was the medium through which we try to reach out to the people, the advantages of nuclear technology for an emerging country. May I have the next slide, please? Yes, then an engineering scientist who I was in 1970, I had the privilege of learning science communication from Japan, and we were explaining the advantages of science and technology application in the society to the Japanese people in Japanese language based on Indian experience. That was the professional beginning of nuclear space science communication in my country. Next one, please. Yes, we thought that the supply chain of science communication begins with children. And in order to do that, we should have a creative science literature for children. So we started an exclusive science magazine. And this is the only science magazine in India today exclusively devoted to children. And we have 500,000 copies. It's fortnightly. It was 5 million readers. It's meant for children under 14. It is in science storytelling mode. And the Kerala's Zimu, Professor Shivadas, he has written 200 books in science, including 118 elements for the periodic table for that development of science literature among children. And this is a hallmark of science communication in my country. Can I move to the next? May I have the next? Yes. then the best way to communicate science is to go to the houses and tell them the importance of science. So a mechanical engineer went into 50,000 houses and told the housewives that it is possible to increase the heat transfer efficiency of the fireplace you use. And we redesigned the fireplaces and kept it in 50,000 houses as a living proof of the application of science and technology, so that it becomes integrated and internalized into the women folk of my country, my state. Yes. Can I have the next one? Yes. And science literacy is our ultimate objective, but the primary precondition for that is adult literacy. So a mechanical engineer went into the field, into one district of our place, and everybody was touched personally. And we moved the people to such an extent that even a 96-year-old neoliterate was created thanks to the massive revolution in literacy and later in science literacy. Next one, please. Healthcare is, that is during the COVID time, the first COVID patient from Wuhan came to Kerala, and the Kerala system was ready. We have a neurosurgeon who has been preparing for this very well. And this is the first team which came with the COVID infection from Wuhan straight to Kerala. That was the first arrival. And we were medically prepared state. Now here you will find a politician teacher. One of the science communicators was the health minister of the state at that point of time. Next one. Yes. So we have, I said that we have only 25,000 women. We tried our best to get the best percentage of women into that, but we still have only 25 out of 60,000 people. So that is thanks to the effort of a professor of econometrics, and he did that. Now the question is science political or apolitical in my context? Yes. When we started this establishment of science communication way back in the 1960s, we had a worldview, and that worldview was driven by dialectical materialism. We knew that the entire universe can be explained in terms of mechanistic forces, and that it is possible to have a worldview, a humanistic worldview based on dialectical materialism. And therefore, there is a politicalization of science communication right from the beginning. And if anything is to be impacted, the society, it is necessary that there should have been governmental support for that. And we found all through, particularly the initial stages, in the production of a linguistic vocabulary, in the transmission of that vocabulary, and making exclusive science magazines, it is possible for us to do it because the government in power was very, very supportive, and even today, of science communication. Well, that's my brief presentation. I stop here. And I will take questions. Yes, may I have this question? This is just to say, my last slide shows that my native language continues to be the most powerful medium of science communication. I write a column which is read by 18 million people every day, whereas if I were to write in English, hardly 0.1 million people will read that. Therefore, access to the public, access of science communication to the public is done in the local medium, and I have just given an example. Every week we run this course. Yes. That's a of a long story, cutting it very short. Thank you.
Thank you very much, AP. There's a comment in the chat by Julia about the fact that she was very surprised that only 1% in India speaks English. And then there was a response by Alessandro saying, well, 1% of 1.400 million is actually 14 million, which is quite a lot of people who speak English. So I don't know whether you had a comment about that, AP.
Did I get the question properly, madam? Was it about the significance of English as the medium of communication?
The fact that less than 1% of Indians speak English was surprising to one of our delegates.
Yes, the Indians who speak English are in the urban sector. Most of them are the academicians. They use English as a medium. But if you want to do science communication, the English-speaking people have access to the finest in the global scene. Most of them read Nature and Scientific American and New Scientist in the morning. So we need science communication for the rural people in different language. We may be absorbers of global information through some of the finest world-class journals, but we will be doing it, transforming it and transmuting it and making it available for the rural people for social action. That's the importance of language.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask our 5 speakers if they could start their video so that we've got 10 minutes left. for a quick session. So question session. So if anyone has any questions, then please put it in the chat. I wanted to make a comment that we heard from quite diverse cultures then, and we heard about a range of different actors, which I thought was interesting. So we heard about journalists, we heard about politicians, we heard about political leaders, we heard about science entrepreneurs, we heard about experts. And it was interesting that Nicola used the term experts rather than scientists, because are there other experts other than scientists, Nicola? And we heard about NGOs. And then in that last presentation, we heard about a range of different actors in the space in India. So I wanted to ask all of our panel whether they had any comments about the relationships between actors in their country and what that tells us about science communication and its relationship with politics in particular. So does anyone want to go first with that, about this relationship between science communication and politics, particularly when you're looking at different actors? So I'm going to try and spotlight our speakers. Let me see. More. Add a spotlight. Nicola, add a spotlight. Add a spotlight. And I'm missing Lewis. There you are. Excellent. Thank you, Lewis. So did anyone want to address that question about this nexus between different actors and politicians or leaders, political leaders, and what that means for science communication? Yes, AP.
Yes.
And I'll ask each of you.
Politicians and statesmen are engaging scientists for communicating their views, and political parties will be engaging science communicators and technology communicators and innovation communicators as part of their political strategy.
So they're actually appropriating science communicators for their own agenda. That's interesting. All right. Anyone else want to make a comment on that? Or yes, Habib. Sorry, yes, Lewis.
Yes, I was just to comment that this is more or less the case here in Spain, at least concerning the commodification of academia. There is an attempt to instrumentalize science communication in order to advance certain political priorities. But this use of science communication, of course, applies at the level of mentalities or social consciousness. This is a way to shape certain consciousness, social consciousness, by certain powerful social groups that pretend to introduce or to make possible certain necessary policies, in this case concerning the commodification of academia.
So there are advocacy groups involved, is what I heard you say, that are influencing that agenda, which is interesting. Habib, Nicola, Qing. Yeah, Habib, did you want to say something? Then I'll go.
I have questions for each, because I'm a little bit critical, you know. So Luis, for the first question. Luis, do you think that the corporate groups, the high-tech science and technology group, try to influence the science communicator, the science-based public communicator? So, you know, some are activist science communicator all over the world like me. I will not be sold out for the scientific organization at any time, not at all. I will work for the people. I will already chest through, I already protest. My position is quite different in science communication. So what is your perception? Do you include like any thought in between, or try to include the both, that the science-based organizations are trying to influence or buy the science communicator? You're trying to say something or find something through your research?
Now let's have a quick answer, because I want to bring in Nicola and Qing as well.
Yes.
So Louis?
Just very quickly, In fact, there is a problem here. My research focuses on journalists as mediators, as science communicators, and they are not aware of the fact that they are disseminating propaganda because they share the same values concerning how universities must go forward. And that goes that they are completely embedded into that ideology of academic entrepreneurship. So no polarization in that sense. There is like a no polarization.
Okay, I wanted to go to Qing. Qing, you talked about scientists being not over politicized, but over ordered.
Mhm.
I wondered if you could explain that a little bit, and then I'll come to Nicola with a question.
Okay, so actually, I want to talk about the first question about the relationship about science and the politics. So about that question, I have some opinions. It's about that. It's not important. It's not also important about the relationship between science communication and the politics. It is also important to find the relationship between our politic or the politic and the science communication. Since in China, almost every scientist have the political positions, and I mean every great scientist in China have the national political positions, and they have their own business, and that's why they can incorporate into the China's development. And about the about the overall thing, I think about the materials interviewed from the scientists. All the scientists in China have a lot of unorganized life. I mean, their life are so various. They have different experience, and in the biographies, the journalists make it older, make it like scientists try hard to make efforts for the politics for the countries. But in the realities, it's not as the same. I mean, every scientist have their own lives, and they met a lot of difficulties. And it's not all about politics, but the journalists make it all about politics. And that's why
Nicola,
it is important about the politics. Yeah.
thanks, Qing. That's very interesting. And I feel like we could keep talking for a very long time. But anyway, Nicola, I wanted to come to you and bring you into the conversation. I was interested that climate scientists were more likely to be critical of politicians than those involved, the visible COVID scientists. Did you have a particular reason or hypothesis of why that might be the case?
Well, a little bit. We think that, first of all, because climate experts, we could see because of the because they use blaming, because they used negative assessments and so on and so forth, we kind of got the feeling that they were frustrated with politics not acting according to science, and that's why they were more looking back, saying, okay, this was not going right, this is not going right, we need to act, and so on and so forth, while COVID-19 experts did more make more calls to actions due to the daily developing studies we could see during that time. And in the case of climate change was already on the agenda in the 1980s, and it kind of got a little bit drawn back by the overlaying topic of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we saw that they also used media strategies and acted again like according to media logics to put maybe climate change back on the agenda, and that's what we could see. And so we saw more frustration than advices, actually.
So they were deliberately controversial to try and raise that issue again.
Yes, maybe, yeah.
Yeah. Habib, I can see that you're biting at the bit, and I feel like, as I said, we could continue this conversation, but we've got literally 20 seconds left.
No problem. You can ask me a question, please. Otherwise, I will feel deprived of an Australian accent.
Okay, well, I'll end with a final question to you. And I was I think you're right that there's not been enough research looking at that relationship between NGOs, science, communication, and politics.
Yes.
Have you got any suggestions of what we should focus on in research in that area, and why? That's my question. What should we focus on in this nexus between NGOs, government, and science communication?
Yeah, so the thing is, the NGO have the most important thing in a developing country like ours. Government cannot enter into every aspect of the society. So under that circumstances, NGOs are playing a bigger role. I already said. So they are also trying to develop the knowledge of the people. They're trying to educate the people about some social issues, about some scientific issues, about some health and climate issues, epidemiological issues. So in that way, science communication is flowing there. And so, nowadays, the NGOs are perceiving, the NGO experts, activists are perceiving that it's very important and imperative that they need to work on that. Of course, international actors are helping them, such as INGOs, UN-related organizations, WHO, World Bank are financing you or financing those NGOs. And of course, they are giving guidelines, expert guidelines in order to develop a concrete health messages. And they're also following the guidelines from there as well. So what I see that the nexus that you talk about, yes, it's a part of participatory democracy. It's about participatory community, that a single entity cannot be a development actor in a community. For example, government cannot improve the situation of the whole people. So some people from the volunteers, some people from the NGOs, some people from outside as well can contribute to a society in order to improve there, because a particular society is not 100% correct scientifically and sociologically as well. We need to take from China from as well. We need to take from Europe. We need to take from Australia. We need to take from India. So this is a multidimensional approach. We need it's a kind of multiple voices in science communication. And this is why I say the NGO has a multiple role, as a part of multiple role, as a co-creator of knowledge regarding science communication and COVID-19 preventions.
Thank you, Habib. It's wonderful to have your passion and your interest and enthusiasm. And I wanted to repeat what one of our participants said, Olympia Driva, who says, thank you for all these presentations. It was so refreshing to hear from a diverse panel. And I can only back up that view. Thank you so much. I want to hear more from each of you about what you're doing. Thank you, everyone, for being part of this last online session as part of PCST 2023. Most people stayed the whole presentation, which I think is a testimony to the quality of the speakers we had today. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.